Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Making Meaning Live Show. My name is Natalia Giron, and I'm going to be your host today. I am a member of the talent acquisition team, and I'm also a Spanish medical interpreter myself. I have been doing that for more than 15 years. Today, here on video with me, we have Jessica, our ASL interpreter. And behind the scenes, pairing with Jessica, we have Audrey. So thank you to both for helping us today. Today, for the audience, we would like to know where you're watching us from. We have a chat box, so please drop your comments, drop your questions, and we're going to be answering them throughout the show. We already have a lot of them coming in, which is wonderful. We have some people joining us from Mexico City and other people asking about how to reach us, the recruiting team. So if you're interested in recruiting with us or sending your application, do so. Log in to amnhealthcare.com/interpreters. Thank you. But we would love to hear from you all. So today's topic, what makes an interpreter qualified and why that's important. So stick around because by the time we're done with today's show, we're going to have the answer to that question. And for that, we have a lovely team of guests that are going to be here to help us. So without much further ado, let's bring our guests. Hello, ladies. We have Diana, Celine, and Tatiana. Thank you for joining us. I really do appreciate it. So let's take a couple of minutes and go around the room. And why don't you introduce yourselves? Dee, you want to start?
Yeah, of course. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Deanna. I have been a recruiter in our language services department for about 4.5 years, working in our employee and contract hiring. I love working in language services. It's such a vast field, and even greater are the interpreting professionals I get to work with every day. They're so knowledgeable, and their continued practice is always really inspiring to me. I think interpreting is a very active profession, so it always requires continued learning. And I personally think that's an invaluable skill. So it's really great to be surrounded by so many that strive for excellence in their work. And I am just grateful to facilitate partnerships and opportunities for such a great crowd.
Thank you, Dee. We're very happy to have you here today. Celine?
Hello, everyone. My name is Celine Aguenmayo. I'm a French interpreter. I've been interpreting for about 10 years, but I've been working with AMN for almost 3 years now. So I'm happy to be here with everyone.
We're happy to have you as well. Tatiana, let's hear from you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Tatiana. I'm a Russian interpreter, and I work on the Luna team at AMN. With AMN, I have been working for almost 3 years, and I'm happy to share my experiences with the audience today.
Well, we appreciate you being here as well. Okay, ladies, so let's get to it. Let's begin with Tatiana. How did you get into interpreting?
So I became a professional interpreter when the COVID lockdown started. At that time, there was a huge demand in community remote interpreters because this profession became essential. Interpreters became like first responders, and because it was very critical at that time for the society to maintain infrastructure, health, and well-being. That's why in the summer of 2020, I completed a 4-week course of training at a call center and became a remote professional community interpreter. And later, I became a video medical interpreter. That's how I get into interpreting.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Celine, what made you choose to work in the medical field specifically?
I would say that the medical field probably chose me. When I first began as an interpreter, after completing a 40-hour training, I was working in person as an interpreter, and most of the work that I was doing at the time was in the medical field in different clinics, in hospitals, and so I naturally started working more and more in the medical field.
Yes, very highly qualified by working with all those healthcare providers. So, Dee, what is your favorite part about helping interpreters to find their dream job?
My favorite part about helping interpreters find their dream job is just to see them progress in their career and expand their interpreting experience. I've talked to interpreters from all different backgrounds, from newly budding to seasoned professionals, and it's great to keep in touch and see how confident they've become and what projects they've been working on, and of course, get them into an opportunity that fits their experience and lifestyle at the moment too. Is equally important, I think, for a dream job.
Yes, and you do a very good job at it. So, she's a very good recruiter if you want to contact her. Recommend her myself. Tatiana, tell us a bit
Yes.
more about your language background and how did you become proficient in more than one language?
So my native language is Russian because I was born and raised in Russia. And I've been interested in foreign languages all my life since childhood, because for me, it was like the window to the world and the tool to explore and learn cultures of different countries firsthand. So I graduated from a pedagogical university in Russia. And over there, I studied English, German, and Latin. But my specialty was teaching English as a second language or as a foreign language. And after graduation, I taught English to Russian speaking students at various educational institutions in the territory of the former Soviet Union. And I also worked on my research paper on English phraseology, hoping to become one day a PhD in linguistics, but it never happened. In the early 90s, when the Soviet Union fell apart, I left my aspirations and teaching job, and I became a full-time translator and paralegal so that I could help thousands of refugees fleeing the post-Soviet territory. So I helped them prepare their immigration papers. There was a demand, and I answered the call. And that experience allowed me to expand my vocabulary in the legal field. And we all know that translating and interpreting are completely two different things. It's a different way of converting the language from to converting information from one language to another. Translators convert written text, while interpreters convert spoken language. Translators have time to do research, to edit, to use the dictionaries and other tools, while interpreters, they perform in real time under high pressure to support communication between two parties with no tools or minimal tools. In my view, consecutive, especially simultaneous interpretation is the highest level of language proficiency. And working as a translator, I had a luxury to think over each and every word. I dig deep into paper dictionaries because at that time there was no internet. So I had time to deliver a quality translation. However, uh, I had very little exposure to spoken English language until I came to the United States. It took me a while to start thinking in English, and I learned the difference between American and British English. Even though I had been working as an interpreter for many years by now, I still continue to master my skills, my language skills, and expand my English vocabulary. It's a work in constant progress, and as Miley Cyrus sings in her song, it's gonna be another mountain. So professional growth is the constant climb.
Yes, you're very right. Very commendable the work that you did with those refugees. That's
Thank you.
wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us. Please, for the audience, drop in your comments and questions on the chat. We would love to hear from you. Celine, let's go to you. What inspired you to learn more than one language?
Well, even though I grew up in the United States, I grew up in a bilingual household with French and English being spoken in our house. So that was always a part of my life to have two different languages. But of course, because I grew up in the United States, it required a lot of effort on my part as well to study, to be able to read and write well, and to always improve my language and grammar skills. But I love to communicate, so communication, learning, working on my communication skills was always something that was very important to me. And because there's people from 26 different countries that speak French, French can vary amongst the different countries. And so it was important to me to be able to communicate effectively with people from all over the French speaking world. And I've done a lot of volunteer work over the years in the French speaking community as well. And so that's all pushed me to continue always growing in my language skills and my communication skills.
Yeah, and being an interpreter really gets you going into the communication field. So yeah, thank you for sharing that as well. Dee, what are the some of the hot languages we are currently recruiting for? Let's share with the audience.
Yes, we are excited to hire American Sign Language interpreters to join our teams for remote and in-person opportunities across the US. We also have expanded some of our lines, including Cantonese and Vietnamese, to Mexico, and then as well as continued need for some rare languages, Kekchi and Rohingya.
Yes, we are busy. If you want to send your application, please do so. amnhealthcare.com/interpreters. Please send your application and you will hear from one of our many, many qualified recruiters. Thank you, Dee, for sharing that. Okay, Tatiana, from your experience, why is it important to go through medical interpreter training prior to working as a medical interpreter? What would you say?
First of all, training is non-negotiable in healthcare. It's a requirement. You need to be 18 years and older. You need to be bilingual and complete a course of training. Even medical personnel with knowledge of other languages, they are not legally permitted to interpret without being trained and vetted in medical interpreting. Some patients try to communicate with providers directly, and in this case, there is always a risk of misunderstanding and unfortunate outcomes. I will give you a couple of examples from my experience. A family member called the doctor's office asking for emergency appointment for the patient who experienced chest pain, according to the caller. And provider immediately called back with me, with the interpreter, thinking about a potential emergency. But it turned out that the patient had pain in the breast. In Russian, the same word is used for both the chest and breast. So the family member interpreted pain in the breast as pain in the chest into English. And that was far from the emergency situation. Another example, I had another call where a female threatened to sue her provider, her surgeon, because he completely removed her fallopian tubes instead of tying them up as she thought. Obviously, the patient signed a consent for the surgery without clear understanding what the plan was. And should they have an interpreter before the surgery, the malpractice wouldn't happen. And prior to my training as a medical interpreter, I had a training, as I mentioned before, as a community interpreter, which is a broader profession, where I learned the rules and protocols of over-the-phone interpreting, basic vocabulary to be able to take phone calls from financial institutions, from banks, police, jails, utility companies, schools, doctors' offices, hospitals, emergency rooms. And when I started interpreting over the phone, my biggest challenge was to handle stress. And it had a huge toll on me. Chronic stress is not a good thing for anybody. Short-term stress is fine, but long-term, it's not good. And I experienced that stress for many reasons, for different reasons, like technical issues, like poor audio or noise, people speaking over each other, not pausing, people yelling and screaming out of frustration, and even my lack of knowledge of different realities of life in America. So uh, that was before I became a medical interpreter. And when I had a 40-hour training as a medical interpreter, that completely changed my life and how I feel about this profession. The stress went away because as a result of training, I knew how to handle different situations. I got the tools. I had a wonderful trainer. Her name is Annalia Lang, and she just not give me she just not just gave me knowledge and techniques how to handle different situations, but she changed my even attitude towards people in general, talking about bias that I never thought before. So as a result of training, I became not only professional, I think I became a better person. And during that training, I also learned how to take care of myself mentally, physically, to prevent burnout. And thanks to that training, I learned how to deal with stress and how. And since then, I have been enjoying doing my work. And so, training gives medical interpreters the knowledge and tools how to do their job successfully.
Yes, you're very right. Whenever we get those medical interpreters that have been properly trained, you see that self assurance and that knowledge that makes them be able to handle those tough medical sessions. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that, Tatiana.
You're
We
welcome.
have some questions here. We have a person that's asking if being here right now means that they're being considered for the interpreter position. Unfortunately, no, not really. We do need for you to go to our website and apply. Send us your application, amnhealthcare.com/interpreters, and a recruiter will contact you. Another person is asking that they started their application process, but they were missing the certification, which the person has just completed. That's Mariama. Go ahead and still send in all your credentials, all your requirements. We go through the files every so often, so we will get back to you. All right. Celine, another question for you. What was the key learning that you took from medical interpreter training that you took with you when you went to work?
Well, just as Tatiana mentioned, I also took a community interpreter 40-hour training, and I agree with everything she was explaining about how it prepares us for working as an interpreter, especially the portion on ethics. Learning the ethics of interpreting helps you to go into this career professionally. There's a lot of interpreters out there that can be a bit unprofessional if they're not trained properly. And so it's very important to get this training so that we can handle all the different situations that we face professionally and applying the ethics. And in particular, accuracy. I remember one of my coaches told me that no matter how accurate you are as an interpreter, you can always be more accurate. And that's something that has always stuck with me. And so I'm always constantly working on it, trying to remind myself of how I can improve, looking for different ways I can improve in my interpreting to be more accurate, to make sure that I am doing my job professionally, accurately. And also during the training, we learn how to properly ask for clarification in ways that it doesn't disrupt the flow of the conversation so that things can go smoothly, the conversations between the providers, the patients, and it makes for a lot less stressful experience when we understand how to properly clarify and verify information. So I would say accuracy is the biggest thing I took with me, the need for accuracy.
Exactly. An interpreter has to always be as accurate as possible. Yes. One of our listeners here, Kirenia, is wanting to know how do they handle burnout after a shift or after emotionally crushing sessions? Tatiana, you want to answer that one? What do you feel?
How I handle the stress. So I learned the tools. And by the way, at AMN, we learn something new on a daily basis from our experience. And also we have a portal, it's called Learn Upon. And it takes only 5 minutes a day to to train yourself in a certain area. So one day I read like a letter on this in this portal. I read a letter of written by one of our, I think it was Arabic interpreter, and she was telling about her situation, about her stress and burnout, and how she deals with that. And it stuck with me. She said, "When you see something, uh, when there is a stressful situation," she said, "it's a mess, but it's not mine." So if we are overwhelmed with emotions, we cannot perform properly. Like my father was a surgeon, but when my mother had appendicitis, he was not allowed to perform the surgery because it's very emotionally charged. And when a person feels a lot of emotions, they cannot perform their job. So this phrase of this interpreter stuck with me. It's a mess, but it's not mine. Um, so you concentrate on doing your job, and you can process this session later. Think about you actually don't take it personally. Don't imagine that you are this patient. Actually, after stressful sessions, I even think about myself like, you know what, I started I started uh, value and appreciate my health, even, and I started taking better care of myself because I don't want to end up in this situation. So it's like, yeah, it's stress, but I know how to handle it. I learned how to handle it, and I even benefit from. I learned from each and every experience that I've been observing on my job.
Thank you. Thank you for helping us with that. We have Fawad Masudi, who's wanting to know if we currently have openings for Pashto and Dari, and if we're hiring from abroad. Dee, you want to take this one?
Sure. We have a few openings for some in-person opportunities depending on your city in the US, so we can look into those if you do want to contact a recruiter. We are not currently hiring outside of the US for most of our languages. We do have some opportunities in Costa Rica and Mexico for some languages. So again, reach out to your recruiter for specifics.
Yes, yes. Send your application, amnhealthcare.com/interpreters. I would love to hear from you. And Dee, I'm sorry, back to you. Can you share with the audience the requirement on training that we currently are asking from our interpreters?
Yes. So, as Tatiana and Celine both mentioned, so whether you are an employee or contractor with us, we do require a minimum 40-hour medical interpreter training to qualify. This is not only a requirement for AMN, but also does abide by the Joint Commission standards outlined by NCIHC. So, we are fulfilling a legal requirement. So, you must pass training through internally or a third party approved. And then we do require a language proficiency assessment between English and your target language, and then a HIPAA training for healthcare and privacy compliance. So for employees, we do provide all of these. And then for contractors, you will have to share these as a part of our credentialing process. And again, if you do have any specific questions, feel free to contact your recruiter for more details.
Yes, we love those 40-hour medical interpreter training courses. That's a big thing, and it makes you very qualified and highly trained. So yeah, we appreciate it when you guys have it. Tatiana, tell me, once you completed the training, how did you prove your language proficiency and knowledge of all the medical terminology?
After I completed a 40-hour training as a medical interpreter, I was working full time in this capacity, and I was studying for the top national certification exam for interpreters in healthcare. And when I passed this exam, I got certified by CCHI. which stands for Certification Committee for Healthcare Interpreters as a medical interpreter. And I've been proving my proficiency every single day on my job. I work full time.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Those national certifications, or when you've gone through the CCHI or NBCMI, also high, big on our list. We really love those as well. That makes you the best qualified medical interpreters we have. Okay. Celine, do you have any tips you can provide to help candidates prepare for the language assessment test?
Yes. I guess my number one advice would be to become a bit obsessed by improving your vocabulary skills. All day long, you can learn something new throughout your day when you're watching TV, when you're doing anything. We would want to be constantly writing down words that we wouldn't know how to interpret into one of the languages. We can constantly be thinking, practicing interpreting when we are listening to the radio, listening to a podcast. I highly recommend taking notes of any words that you don't know and then setting yourself goals each week of a certain amount of words to learn. Flashcards are very helpful. I also think it's very practical if we think about situations where we've been at the doctor, for example. Think about the types of questions doctors ask you, the vocabulary that's used. And if you're not able to interpret even basic medical terminology, that tells you that there's a lot of need to keep working at improving your vocabulary. I find that podcasts are very helpful for learning. If you can find medical podcasts in English and in your other language, or if you speak multiple languages in your other languages, that specifically speak about medical situations, that can be very helpful to learn new terminology. Also, just comparing different websites that talk about, more official medical websites in English and in the other language, and comparing the vocabulary. And just as I said earlier, all day long, writing down words you're not familiar with, how to interpret, and creating flashcards. For me, that's always been very beneficial in helping me to prepare for these types of language assessment tests and to improve my vocabulary.
Yes, yes. The medical terminology for interpreters is never a done deal.
Mm.
We're always learning, and I always tell everybody, I mean, we work alongside those doctors that are always studying themselves, so we have to also continue learning. But yeah, thank you for that. We have here a person that's saying that they have Aquilia has a community interpreter training certificate. And would that be okay? Can they apply online? What would you say, Dee?
Yes, I would say definitely apply. The community interpreters typically do encompass some medical as well, so those are great to have. You'll still go through an internal training with us for employees, so that'll get you more acclimated to our environment. But yes, definitely apply if you have the community training.
Okay, thank you for that. And Dee, once again, can you explain to the audience how we assess that language proficiency here at AMN?
Yes, so whether you are a contractor or employee with us, we do require the language proficiency assessment wherever there is one available. There are some cases for rare languages, so we can talk through those. But for employees, we do facilitate the testing process during the interviews. And then for contractors, you will have to provide your language proficiency as a part of your credentials. There are a few different vendors we recommend that do third-party testing, and you will do listening, speaking, reading, writing comprehension on these tests for each language. Again, make sure your terminology is upkept and then accuracy is graded. And once we have the results, we can move forward with the interview process.
Exactly. And also recruiters have a lot of knowledge about the whole language assessment process, which sometimes could be a little bit complicated. So if you contact a recruiter, we would guide you. We can recommend certain vendors that we recommend. They're really good at their job. Okay, thank you. Tatiana, let's go to you. Once you completed your medical interpreter training, which you did so successfully, how did you go about gaining experience?
After completion of medical interpreter training and getting certified, I continue working as a full-time video medical interpreter. and I was learning something new every day through my post-session research. And at AMN, we have a vocabulary channel where we interpreters can post information about new terms or procedures that we encountered during the session. And this combination of individual and collective learning is beneficial for every member on our team. We learn from each other by sharing our knowledge. And I think that collective learning helps us to expedite our professional growth. Um, and it gives us a sense of unity among colleagues on the team. And as I mentioned before, at AMN, we have Learn Upon courses that are very helpful in keeping us up to date in our profession. And these courses give us a compass to navigate in the right direction in tough circumstances. And these courses teach us to think critically, because no matter how well you are trained, the life is unpredictable, and you never know what circumstances you're going to find yourself in. So these courses are very helpful, and they teach you how to handle different situations. And it reminds us, these courses also remind us about our ethical values of our profession. It's like we have like doctors have their Hippocratic oath, and we have our pledge that I would like to cite right now. I commit to striving to excellence in every encounter by showing up with integrity, accountability, compassion, competence, and respect. I will support effective communication with compassion and respect for human dignity, protect confidentiality, and treat every participant fairly and without bias. So, this is my motto.
And it's a very good motto. Yeah, the interpreting profession is one of those where you really do feel you're making a difference. Like it's a very commendable job. So we're there, we're helping. So that's pretty good. Okay. Celine, were you able to get experience interpreting before coming to AMN? And if so, I mean, how did you go from that, and how did it help build your skill set?
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, I began by taking a 40-hour community training course, and then I started working in person as a medical interpreter, going physically into clinics and hospitals. I also would sometimes work in school settings to interpret for parents, like different conferences that were taking place. And then I ended up starting with a different company working as a remote interpreter. I worked on video and audio. With this position, however, it wasn't just medical calls that I was receiving. I was receiving calls from many different industries, insurance, like car insurance, health insurance, any banking, customer service. I would receive calls from lawyers, from court settings. So I was receiving so many different types of calls that even though it was a bit overwhelming in the beginning, it really helped me to grow in my experience, to become, to diversify my experience, which helped me to really grow as an interpreter and to learn how to handle different situations. I also started working at that point, interpreting asylum seeker interviews for the immigration services. And then I worked as a contractor with the immigration court, and I would interpret a lot of immigration court settings remotely, especially during the pandemic. And that was very helpful because I also had to take extra training. I did extra training to start working for the immigration court. I took classes on how to do different types of interpreting, not just consecutive, but also simultaneous interpreting. And so all of these different experiences have helped me to really grow as an interpreter. And then a few years ago, I decided I had applied at AMN and decided to start working in the medical field again. So all the different experiences really help you grow and help you to be more effective as an interpreter.
Yes, and you learn a lot about each and every field there is. Whenever you're an interpreter, you're faced with everything. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Dee, what would you say? What kind of like experience are we looking for from interpreter candidates to come on board to work with AMN?
Yes, so ideally, we are looking for candidates with 6+ months of interpreting experience or exposure and a genuine interest in the field. Beyond that, we do again have our interview onboarding process. So you'll have to complete the language proficiency, interpreter training, the HIPAA training. And then once those requirements have been met, then we'll look forward to you joining the team.
Yes, looking forward to that. And Eric says that AMN has the best interpreters in healthcare. So thank you, Eric. Yes, we would like to think so. Yes, thank you. All right. Tatiana, can you please share a time when the qualifications you earned to become a medical interpreter helped you better navigate a difficult situation?
I use my skills that I learned over the years and during the training. During every, I use these skills during on my job during every session. First of all, it took me the entire life to develop language proficiency in English. I'm not talking about Russian because it's my native language, but um, then what skills are necessary or what skills I learned during the training. I learned how to do active listening and note taking. I developed my memory skills. I learned how to self-assess, how to do reflective practice after the call, and what stuck in my mind about critical thinking. So this is very important tool or a very important skill for the interpreter. And what I remember, be mindful. The training taught me to be mindful, and it became my second nature. I follow this principle not only on my job, but in my private life. I became mindful about everything. And I remember, I don't know who said that, but it's true. Watch your thoughts as they became your words. Watch your words because they become your actions. Watch your actions because they become your habits. And watch your habits because they become your character. And watch your character because it becomes your destiny. So speaking about training, not training, but how the training helped me on the job. As I mentioned before, um, it helps me tremendously. The training shaped me as an interpreter. Like, so I would like to share about, um, I would like to tell something about one session that I had. And that session was very hard on me. And it lasted 45 minutes, and there were a lot of people in the room. It was like a conference hall, and a lot of people were sitting along the table on both sides, and providers were talking to the parents of a young baby. And I had similar situation with my son when he was young, and it hit home. And internally, I was shaking. But my idea is, who if not me? Why should I transfer this session to somebody else? I will handle it. But it came to a point in 45 minutes of intensive training, of intensive interpreting, when my mind went blank. I just froze. And at that time, the session actually was over, luckily. But what I learned from that experience, that no matter how tough you are, if for any reason you cannot perform at this particular moment, you need to withdraw. You need to transfer the session to somebody else. I know that in simultaneous interpreting, there are always two interpreters to support each other, because it's very intense and it takes a lot of energy and people need a break. Probably it was my time to have a break, but what I'm trying to say that um, I remember that when I was trained, there was such a thing as when you get highly emotional, you need to withdraw. That the lesson that I learned from my session, that session.
Yes, thank you for sharing that with us. Yes, interpreters come across very difficult and emotional situations all the time. It is healthcare, so people go to the doctor because something's going on. So yes, it is important to be able to manage those very strong emotions. Yes, thank you for sharing that, Tatiana. And from our chat, Potsi Garcia would like to know if we have positions remote for insurance agents. Unfortunately, no. This is a medical interpreting profession, and AMN recruits medical interpreters. And for you, Dee, this question, I have a candidate, Wesam, who says that it's deeply interested, but it's a dentist with no medical interpreting experience, and he would need some guidance. What would you recommend? I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. So yes, I would recommend talking with one of our recruiters. We have had candidates, move professions, come into the interpreting field. So there are some different avenues to get you in and onto the team. So I would suggest talking with us. We do have some internal training programs or some that we can recommend to get you set up for success here.
Yes, recruiters are very knowledgeable on how to guide our candidates. Thank you. Thank you, Dean. Okay, Celine, can you give us an example of a type of session when a medical interpreter is needed to be able to provide meaningful communication?
I guess I would start by saying that every individual has a right to fully understand and be able to clearly comprehend and communicate when they go to see their medical provider. And so, if we go off of this basis, that means that every different session requires a trained professional medical interpreter. But to give a few examples of specific scenarios where you can see why it's so important, I could say, for example, let's say somebody is receiving a new diagnosis. Sometimes it might be a diagnosis that's very hard to understand or to accept. Or perhaps somebody is going to have a surgery, and a surgery that could be a bit complicated to explain and to be understood. We can see why having a professionally trained medical interpreter who knows the terminology but also has the training as to how to handle these types of situations is really the best thing to have in this kind of a situation, especially because oftentimes people prefer to have their family members do their interpreting, but family members aren't trained with the proper terminology. And oftentimes, family members tend to omit things that they don't necessarily want their aging parents, for example, to hear. Sometimes, especially if it has to do with a very serious diagnosis that could affect their life. And so, it's very important to have an interpreter that's trained that understands their role. Another situation I can think of is therapy sessions, because we receive a wide range of calls as medical interpreters, and oftentimes we're interpreting for people who are in a therapy session. And a person has a right to be able to fully express their feelings and to be able to benefit from these sessions, even though they're interpreted. And so, a trained professional medical interpreter knows how to properly manage these kinds of situations so that even though the therapist and the patient aren't able to speak the same language, that they can still come out of these sessions with the same benefits.
Yes, exactly. And it is to the patient's best benefit, I guess, or overall well being that they have a qualified medical interpreter handling the situation and not a relative. Yes, yes. Thank you, Celine. We have Sheikh here who wants to know if we are currently needing Rohingya or Bengali translator or interpreters. We are looking for interpreters. Yes, translation is more so written, but again, go ahead and apply amnhealthcare.com/interpreters. And Elaine is wanting to know how to get more information about the 40-hour medical training. Do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, there are a few options as far as like third-party vendors for training that we can recommend. There, just to name a few, there's Bridging the Gap, there's Alta. We do have an internal one for our employees also. So there's a few different options, and then they do range typically starting around 40 hours up to 100, 160. So it just depends on the kind of education support you're looking for.
Yes, luckily there's plenty available online. So yes, thank you for that, Dean. And back to you. When you go through a resume, Dean, what are the key pieces of information you look for to determine whether a candidate is qualified for the job or not?
Yes, so some key pieces of information I look for is truly how much detail about your experience is listed because I can't draw information from something that's not there. So, whether you're making a career transition or you've been interpreting for a long time, it's easiest for me to assess your skills when they're on your resume. And then, our recruiting team will take over and find the best fit position. So, we'll match your skill set against our openings and hope to make a match. So be sure to list all languages, dialects, proficiency levels, any like contract, employment dates, and companies, modes of interpretation, industries, special projects. Make sure that's all on there. And then resumes can get long, so just make sure you've got the key information on there, and that'll make it a little bit easier to make a match.
Exactly. Give any and every additional information relevant to the position you're applying for. Yeah, that really helps us recruiters to do our job. Okay. Tatiana, can you share a time when the qualifications you earned to become a medical interpreter helped you better navigate a difficult situation? Oh, I'm sorry, I've already asked that one. In a nutshell, what do you think makes an interpreter qualified, and why do you think it is important?
So official requirements to become a medical interpreter are to be 18 years of age or older, to speak fluently 2 languages at least, to have a 40-hour medical training as an interpreter, and you need to pass a proficiency test. And ultimately, the interpreter need to pass a national exam in medical interpreting. Um, it will make them certified. And this is the highest level in the interpreting profession. There is a Latin phrase, tabula rasa, which means a blank slate or a scraped tablet. Training is a writing on this slate. This writing transforms us, bilingual people, it shapes us into professionals. Training makes interpreter to act by certain rules, by the same rules of ethical code of our profession. Um, and I think it's very important to have everybody on the same page because ultimately it saves lives.
Yes, very well said. We have a candidate here who said that he was emailed by somebody from AMN Healthcare once he submitted the resume and wants to know if that person that contacted him is the recruiter and would they need to send another application to the website. Not really. Once you receive the email, probably means that somebody already has your application and we're working with it. So yeah, thank you. Okay. Celine, what would your one piece of advice be for candidates that are multilingual and looking to get qualified as a medical interpreter?
My one piece of advice would be that training is absolutely necessary no matter who you are. Uh, One common misconception is that just being bilingual or multilingual makes a good interpreter, but it's not the truth. Uh, Simply knowing how to speak more than one language doesn't necessarily make the best interpreter. I liked what Tatiana says, that training shapes us as to become professionals or shapes us into professionals. And that's so true. There's so much more involved when working as an interpreter than just simply knowing how to speak 2 languages. There's a whole skill set that is there that is important to learn. And the ethics the ethics are what really help us to do things correctly and to be professional about this career as an interpreter, and helps us to really help people. As Tatiana said, it can save lives in the end by being an accurate interpreter. But all of that training is very necessary. It's essential.
Exactly. It's very different when you're interpreting for like friends and family than when you have to do so professionally in front of those surgeons and those healthcare providers. So yeah, very, very well said. Okay. Dee, what's your last piece of advice for candidates who are interested in working for AMN?
My piece of advice is to reach out today. Don't wait. We have ongoing and ever evolving hiring needs. So, if not today, maybe tomorrow. So, feel free to keep in touch with our recruiters and on our social media for new opportunities. And if it is, training or experience, we can kind of talk through those and get the ball started.
Exactly. Thank you. We keep letting you people know. Please go ahead. You folks at home, go ahead and apply. amnhealthcare.com/interpreters, and we will, a recruiter will contact you. And even if the opening is currently not being needed in a sense, everything is constantly changing. We never know. We will keep your application. We will be in touch. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our show today. I really do want to appreciate Diana, Celine, and Tatiana for helping us all learn a lot about the interpreting profession. We really do appreciate it. And for everybody at home, thank you very much for taking some time to join us. We do this show once a month, and we have another one coming next month. The next one is in March, the third Wednesday of the upcoming month. So please join us, ask us any question. It is a direct line to the recruiting team of AMN. So thank you. Thank you for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.